Today we're going to be learning Yevamot Daf Ayin Bet. Today's daf is dedicated by Becky Goldstein in loving memory of Joe Amanoff, Yosef ben Reuven Belea. Joe's ways to extol the glories of Hashem was to photograph his creations. Through his artistic and sharp eye for detail, his photographs of simple sights and scenes would translate into beautiful sublime paintings, whether they were pictures of faraway places or landscapes of his beloved Gush Etzion. He invoked in me feelings of Magalu Ma'asecha with every new picture, and for that gift I thank him. Blessed is his family left with all those beautiful picturesque memories and the legacy Joe left behind. Priceless. Yehi Zichro Baruch. Okay, we're going to get started now at the bottom of our daf. We were in the middle of discussing the Jews in the desert and how they didn't do a Brit Milah. So the question, real big question, is why didn't they do the mitzvah of Brit Milah in the desert for 40 years? It seems crazy. So Bamidbar, my time alone mahu. Okay, that's the Gemara's question at the very bottom of Ayin Aleph Amabeh. Ibait Aim, or possibly you could say, we're going to give two answers. Mishum chulsha de'orcha, because of their weakness. They were traveling all the time. They made them very weak. Now you might say to me, what do you mean they were traveling all the time? If you really look into the desert, it seems they really, for 38 years, they didn't move at all. However, they were always in ready mode, right? They never knew when God was going to tell them it's time to move. So they never wanted to do Brit Milah, because if they would do a Brit Milah and the next day God would say time to travel, they'd be, I can't move. I just did a Brit Milah. So because of that, right, or the children, it would be hard to move them, the newborn babies, right? If they're sick, if they just had a Brit Milah, so it wouldn't be good timing, and therefore they didn't do it all those years. Ibait Ema, different possibility is Mishum de lo nashiv lehu ruach tzfonit, because the northern wind didn't blow in the desert. Soon we're going to say, on what basis do we know that the northern wind didn't blow? And in fact, it seems like it did blow a little bit, so we'll have to see how this works out. But what is this northern wind? So Rashi explains the northern wind is nocha. It's a very comfortable wind. Lo chama v'lo tzonenet v'chama zorachet, right? It's not too hot, not too cold, and the sun is shining. It sounds like San Diego weather, right? Everybody always says, oh, right, perfect weather all year long. So that's right, that you never had that perfect weather. Why is the weather related? Well, it's easier to heal with this nice weather and the sun and the combination of wind, sun. It was like the right combination, that without that, it's really impossible to have done a Brit Milah. It would have been very difficult to heal. So, right, both kind of explain how it's either difficult to heal or, right, they're all relating to this healing process. So now, why was there no ruach tzfonit? D'Tanya. There's a brighter that says, never blew. My timer. Either because God was upset with them. Because he was upset with them, he didn't bring this ruach tzfonit. So now, why was God upset with them in the desert? Well, first of all, you could think of a lot of reasons why God would be upset with the Jewish people in the desert. They weren't exactly on their best behavior, but they want to pinpoint what exactly it was. Rashi says it must be because of Maaseh Ha'egel. Okay, because they sinned in the golden calf, that basically put them in a bad position with God. He didn't want to bring this ruach tzfonit, which was this nice gift, so to speak. They didn't deserve it. Tosfot has a big issue with this. Tosfot has two issues. The first issue he has is, what do you mean lo nashva ruach tzfonit? It actually says in Masechet Gittin, and he quotes in the Tosfot lo nashva lem ruach tzfonit. He says in the fourth line there, he quotes a Gemara from Gittin, Arba ruchot minashvot b'chol yom. Every single day there's four winds that blow. V'ruach tzfonit minashevet im kulam, and the ruach tzfonit is with all of them. She'ilmalei ken eino olam mitkayem. The world cannot survive without the ruach tzfonit. So therefore, in the beginning of that Tosfot says it must be the ruach tzfonit wasn't ever there by itself. It always came with other winds, but never just the ruach tzfonit, because otherwise it totally contradicts this other Gemara. Right, by the way, this is classic, because Tosfot is always bringing up contradictions from other sources in Shas. But the Nizufinayu is much more interesting, philosophically. So Tosfot says it's not possible that it's from Maaseh Ha'egel. Why? Because Tosfot says it must be, right, Shaharei, I'm looking also in the fourth line of Tosfot, in the next Tosfot, Nizufinayu. Shaharei machal lehem HaKadosh Baruch Hu, v'amar lehem salachti. God forgave them for Chet HaEgel. Once you forgive someone, you can't then still be angry at them and not give them something, right? They went through a forgiving process. God forgave them, right? That was the whole thing with Moshe going up 40 days and getting forgiveness for the Jewish people, and they were forgiven. So once you forgive someone, right, it's like if you have a friend and they do something wrong to wrong you, and you get very upset, and then you forgive them. you can't keep being angry at them. I mean, maybe you will, but you can't keep being angry at them because you already forgave them. So you can't punish them after that. So there's no way God punished them for that. So obviously, Tosfot says, what was it? It must have been, quotes Rabbanit Yitzchak saying it's from the spies. Okay, the sin of the spies is what God was angry at them about and why the Ruach Tzfoni wasn't in the desert. Okay, part of the issue is that happened within the second year, wouldn't be 40 years, but I assume they just used the number 40 as a general, means all the time they were in the desert, even though it wasn't exactly all the time, it was from the second year on. Okay, anyway, that's interesting in and of itself. A second option is there wasn't a punishment. It was just the Ruach Tzfoni couldn't get to them. Why not? The Jews were surrounded, right? There's machloket what exactly the ananei kavod were, but assuming they were actual clouds that surrounded the Jewish people, there was no way for this Ruach Tzfoni to get in. Right? Try to imagine the Jews living in a cloud for 40 years, right? No sun, no winds, right? Nothing, no enemies, right? It was to protect from everything. But in a sense, even though it was to protect them, right? You think about no sunscreen needed because you had the sun protection from you all the time. But on the other hand, it didn't allow this Ruach Tzfoni to get in. So it was just a matter of, because of the situation that they had these ananim that were protecting them, that wouldn't allow the Ruach Tzfoni to get in. And that basically precluded them from doing the mitzvah of Brit Milah. Okay, so then it wasn't because of a punishment or anything. It was just because of the situation. Okay, now we get to very interesting halacha l'maaseh. Based on this, which I'm happy to hear if anyone's ever heard of this before. But Amar Rav Papa, Hilkach Yomi de'eva v'yoma de'shota. If it's a cloudy day or a windy day, lo mahalinam be v'lo mesochrininam be. People don't do a Brit Milah. People don't do Brit Milah on bad weather days. That's what you learn from here. And they also don't bloodlet. Because again, these are two things that need healing, that the weather can kind of mess up the healing process. Okay, so first of all, that's just interesting in and of itself. Okay, this would basically say that if you decide you don't want to do a Brit Milah because it's a windy, stormy day, you don't want to do it on day number 8, even though there's such a big thing to do it on day number 8, which we're going to get to even later today. But basically, they say you can push off your Brit. Okay, now, if you haven't heard of this, don't be surprised because the Gemara also says nobody really does this anymore. Nowadays, that nobody's really doing this. Shomer p'ta'im Hashem. We basically say, hopefully God will protect the foolish people. They basically say it's totally foolish that people do this and don't, right, and do Brit Milah on bad weather days. But, right, hopefully God will protect them and nothing bad will happen to them. Very interesting Gemara in light of, right, that you've probably never heard of this. And it seems to be that if you really didn't want to do a Brit Milah because the weather was really bad, it would be fine. Also, you have to remember nowadays we're much more protected from the elements than we once were, right? So it could be a windy day. You can keep the kid inside, bundle it, you go outside for half a second. It's not the biggest deal. But on the other hand, it is very interesting to see. Tanu Rabbanit. One more last thing about the desert before we move on. Now, even though we said this, Ruach Tzfoni never blew in the desert, it did at one moment every day. What moment would it be? It would be specifically at Chatzi Alayla, at midnight. Okay. Now you might be saying, where did they get this from? Right. So they're going to say where they get it from. It was right in the middle of the night at midnight where God slay all the firstborn of Egypt. Okay. What's the connection, right? What does it have to do with the Ruach Tzfoni? To which the Gemara asks the same question. My Talmuda. Where do you get from God smiting the firstborn of the Egyptians at midnight to the fact that in the desert, the Ruach Tzfoni blew at midnight every day? Hakamashmalan de'et ratzon miltahi. This is to teach you that there's such a concept of eight ratzon. There's a time when God is with us. And just like at midnight, he slayed the firstborn and was there for the Jewish people. Likewise, which is basically what prompted the whole getting out of Egypt. Likewise, in the desert, that same moment of time, this is the concept that things work on cycles of time, just like when else do we have eight ratzon, the 10 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, right? There are times when God is more available for us. So that's what they're saying here. God made sure that, right, and maybe that fits with Tosfot, that there had to be some Ruach Tzfoni, you can't live without it. So God brought it one quick moment every day while they were in the desert, but that was it. Okay, obviously it wasn't enough to help them with the Brit Milah issue. I'm Rav Huna. Now we're moving back to our issue of arel and different types of halachot that come up because of the arel, right? Arel is an uncircumcised person. We already said he can't eat truma. So now I'm a Rav Huna. We're going to deal with this for a while, for about almost a whole amud. Dvar Torah mashuch ochel b'truma u'midivrehem gazru alav mipnei shenir'eh ke'arel. We're now going to talk about a man whose foreskin covers, or like it kind of covers it up already where he was circumcised for one of two reasons. So he had a good circumcision, but over time, the foreskin kind of overlaps and covers it, and he looks like he's not circumcised. Why would this happen? Either it just happened naturally, right? Just happened for whatever reason, or he pulled it down because he didn't want to look like he was Jewish. Okay, someone decides, oh, you know what, I don't want to look Jewish anymore. I don't want people to think I'm Jewish for whatever reason. Everyone can think of lots of reasons. Either he doesn't really want to be Jewish anymore, or he wants to be, but he's scared, he'll get killed if he's in the locker room with non-Jews. In those days, remember, there was all these dangers of non-Jews perhaps wanting to kill Jews. And basically, for that reason, he pulled it down. So we don't know if it's intentional and for what intention, good intent, not good intent, we have no idea. Or it just kind of happened. Either which way comes Rav Huna, and he says he can eat truma on a Torah level because he is circumcised. Because he looks like he's not circumcised, the rabbis forbade it. Now we're going to have two questions on this. Each one's going to come from a different angle. One is going to say, what do you mean it's rabbinic law? He can't do it. It sounds like it's by Torah law. And the other is going to say, what do you mean you can't eat it by rabbinic law? It seems like you can. So each is coming from the opposite perspective. And one we're going to have an answer to, the other one we will not. Meitive, mashuch tzarich sheimo. So they say here it says a mashuch has to do a brit milah. That means he has to fix himself because he's basically like an uncircumcised person. That would sound like on a Torah level rather than on a rabbinic level, he can't eat truma. Because it sounds like the fact that we require him to do a brit milah makes it sound like he's an arel, he's an uncircumcised person. So the Gemara says, no, mashuch tzarich sheimol is midirabanan. And there's the answer to the question. We could have stopped here, but they're going to go on for a while with another question about this. But basically what they're saying is, yes, a mashuch has to do another brit milah because he looks like an arel, and midirabanan, they required him to do another brit milah. Okay, that's very simple. And then on a doraita level, though, he really is circumcised. And therefore, could he truma midoraita, but midorabana, right? They're connected. If we view him like an arel that he needs a brit milah, then he would need to basically not eat truma, but only on a rabbinic level. So now they ask, wait a minute, why did you even think that this source would raise a question? Udekarila, my karila. That's always when they're asking, why do you even ask that question? Isn't it obvious that it's derabanan? Ha tzarich katani. It says he needs to do a brit milah. Now, if you wanted to say on a Torah level, you would have said chayav b'brit milah, right? There's language that indicates obligation. Sarich, you need to, but need to seems weaker. We need to seems the rabbis instituted it. So why did you think from the beginning that this was by Torah law? So now they say, why did he think that when they brought this question? Katay b'seifa. They were confused by the end of this braita. The end of this braita, I'll tell you in very simple words, and then we'll see it all inside. Basically, the braita continues to learn this out from a pasuk in the Torah, from a drasha on a pasuk. So if you're learning it from a drasha on a pasuk, it must mean it's by Torah law. And in the end, what are they going to say? Like we always say, oh, they just connected it to a verse, right? It's asmachta ba'alma. Usually they do it as a mnemonic device where the rabbis connected it to a verse, but not that they actually learned it out from the verse, right? Every time you have a drasha from a pasuk, there's two options. Either it really means it's a Torah law, and it's derived from the pasuk on a Torah level, or the rabbis derived it otherwise, really, but connected it to this verse. So that's basically the two sides we're going to see. The reason they asked the question was they thought the drasha was on a Torah level. Comes the Gemara and answers, and it's not really, it was only rabbinic. And again, we're back to Rav Huna. His position is it's rabbinic, and this braita doesn't contradict. So now let's get into the details of the Seifa. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, lo yamul mipnei shesakana hilo. A person who's mashuch, whose foreskin grew back or got pulled over. So it's dangerous to do another brit milah. So don't cut it off, because what could happen? You could turn the guy into a krut shufcha, right? Where his organ is severed, and that would be a problem, right? That kind of person can't stay married, right? It's a big problem. So don't touch it, basically. Amrulo, so they said to Rabbi Yehuda, v'halo harbe malubi me ben koziva, okay, relevant for ben koziva is ben bar kochva. And here you have, right, we're almost at Lag BaOmer. So they say many people did. Well, there were all these people, apparently his foreskin was pulled over. They were mishuchim. And holidu banim ubanot, and they had children after. Nothing happened to them. Shene'amal. Okay, so now they say, so basically the rabbis disagree with Rav Yehuda. They think they need a brit milah. How do you know this from the verse? So, shene'amal, himol yimol. We're now going to darshan in 2 verses that are next to each other in the section where Abraham gets the commandment to do brit milah. So he's told, himol yimol yili beitecha umikna kaspecha. Okay, so give a brit milah to all the people in your household, etc. Notice the language. It doubles it, right? Himol yimol. It just could have said himol. Okay, it didn't have to say himol yimol. Why is it doubled? To teach you afilu mea pa'amim. You could even have to do it 100 times until you get it right. Ve'omer, and additionally it says et briti heifer. This is the end of the next verse, which says basically someone who doesn't do a brit milah, etc., will get karet. That's where we see karet for this, what we've seen before. And he basically, what's the word? He goes against my covenant. He breaks the covenant between me and him. Okay, so now, what is that added for? Okay, you could have known that otherwise. L'rabot mashuch, that's to include an additional case, which is our case, the mashuch. Okay, the one whose foreskin has stretched or pulled over. So now the Gemara says, "My v'omin." Theoretically, you could have learned it already from himol yimol afilu mea pa'amim, right? Why would you have to do it 100 times if not that the foreskin was kind of, growing over and it didn't look like you had a brit milah? So why do you need both psukim? Remember we said if you do the brit milah and you leave some of the skin on, there's certain ones that prevent the brit milah from being valid. Maybe that's what they meant. Mea pa'amim at the time, right? If you left over something. As opposed to if you did a perfectly good brit milah, but later your foreskin's covering it again, then you might not have thought that was included in the first pasuk, and that's why you need tashma et briti eifal lerabot et hamashuch. Okay, so that's why you need both pasukim. Anyway, the main point is, that's what they're going to say right now. Hu saval midika nasiv lahashas kra deoraitehi. So he, the one who asked the question, thought, they asked the question, Rav Huna, from this source, he thought that since they learned it out from a pasuk, it means it's by Torah law. This I already told you this whole thing. Velohi, but it's not really midirabanan ukras machta ba'alma. It's really rabbinic. They just connect it to the verse. Okay, next. So that was the first question against Rav Huna. We resolved it by saying that source is only talking on a rabbinic level. But now we're going to have a question because this one's going to say actually an arel a mashuch can eat truma. And then we're going to be in trouble. Meitive. Tumtum, we're going to have a lot of discussions today about tumtum and androgynous. So let's just review. A tumtum is someone who has, we don't know whether they're male or female. It's kind of covered up, the skin covering the area, and we don't know what's underneath. And obviously, because we don't know what's underneath, it could be they're male, and then they'll need a brit milah. So they could be arel. So they're safek arel. If they're a woman, obviously, then they're not arel. So tumtum ein ochel b'truma. So he can't eat truma because maybe he's an arel. But nashav avadav ochlim, but his wives, and which we're going to get to, how can a tumtum have a wife? We'll get to that. His wives and his slaves can eat truma. Mashuch, okay, so that's not relevant for our purposes, although we will get into it because once they quote it, they're going to try to figure out how on earth can a tumtum get married if it's not clear whether they're male or female. Mashuch, so again, that's our case, and this is the sentence we're looking for. Ve'nolad kashu mahu, one who's born already circumcised. That's without a foreskin. They can eat truma. Here you see totally against Rav Huna, who said you can't eat truma. We're going to keep going on in the Braita though. Androgynous. Okay, so this is someone who has both male and female organs. Now they have a male organ, so they do a brit milah, so they're circumcised. They might be suffix male, suffix female, but they do a brit milah. So androgynous. They're not really suffix, it's that they're kind of both, okay? Androgynous ochel b'truma ve'ein ochel b'kodeshim. They can eat truma, but they can't eat sacrificial meat. What are we talking about here? We're talking about women can eat sacrificial meat, but if they're kohanim, so they can eat the truma, but they can't eat, there's all this particular types of sacrificial things that you give to the kohen, meats from parts from the sacrifice, that only go to the male kohanim. There's certain ones that go to everyone and certain ones that go to the male kohanim. So the ones that go to the male kohanim can't be given to the androgynous. Tumtum eno ochel lo b'truma v'lo b'kodeshim. A tumtum can't eat truma or kodeshim, right? They can't eat the truma because there may be an RL, and they can't eat the kodeshim because there may be female. Okay, so now, first of all, there's something strange in this, which we're going to get back to, which is it starts off with tumtum ein ochel b'truma, and then at the end it says tumtum ein ochel lo b'truma v'lo b'kodshim. So that's a little bit strange. We're going to have to deal with that later. In any case, katani miyat, in case you got lost in the Braita, which we did, right? The Gemara is going to remind you why we brought this Braita. Katani miyat mashuch v'nola kashumahu l're'ei lo ochlin. The main line here that we wanted to get at was that it says a kohen that's mashuch. A kohen that's mashuch, so can't eat truma. So there you see. Can eat truma, and Rav Huna had said no. So you have a problem now. How do you explain that? Tiyuvta de Rav Huna tiyuvta. So they basically say, yeah, that's a problem. Okay, we don't have an answer to this question. Amar Mar. Now we're going to go back into this Braita and try to understand it better. Tumtum eino ochel b'truma. Nashav avadav ochlim. Nashav letumtum menale. How does this tumtum have a wife? Ilema de kaddish. If you want to say, well, he did kiddushin, right? She, we don't know what he is, took, or what she is, okay, it's hard to say it, right? They, okay, this tumtum, came and betrothed a woman. So now, maybe that's the case. And in fact, we see elsewhere, Ditanya, it says in a Braita, tumtum shekidesh, kiddushav kiddushin. If he does kiddushin with or betroths a woman, it works. And nitkadesh, if someone betrothed the tumtum, kiddushav kiddushin. We treat the tumtum as if the tumtum is a woman, and it works. Okay, so either which way, it's counted. And then we're going to basically say the kiddushin is valid. But the Gemara says, no way, no how. Imr da amr l'chumra, that's only l'chumra. We're going to treat it as if, right, safek kiddushin. So, for example, right, we're going to call, there's all sorts of ramifications of, let's say, he betrothed, the tumtum betrothed a woman, then the woman slept with somebody else, we'll call her an eshet ish, l'chumra, right, to be stringent. But l'kulam yamrina, but to allow the wife to eat truma, we're not going to say it's safek. We don't know. Maybe they're married, maybe they're not married. It all depends whether they're male or female. So, right, safek ishahu. This tumtum is possibly a woman. Ve'ein isha mekadeshet isha. If a woman does kiddushin with another woman, that is not a valid halachic kiddushin. So they wouldn't, right? Then the tumtum wouldn't be allowed to allow the woman to eat truma. So we're going to have two answers to this question. Amar Abaye, kishebeitzav nikarot mibachutz. There's two types of tumtums, basically. One is where the tumtum one is where the tumtum is not, you can't tell at all whether they're male or female. And one is where the testicles are noticed from the outside. In other words, they're covered up, but it's clear that there's testicles there, which means that it's clear that at least, right, they're still safek because they could have female organs underneath his genitals as well. But at least we know that there's a male element to them. So then you could say, so then the kiddushin would be kiddushin because the male side of the tumtum could betroth a woman. Rava Amar, my nashav. Don't think nashav. Nashav means women, right? Now we normally say isha is his wife, but nashav doesn't necessarily mean his wife. What does it mean? Imo, his mother, or its mother. So now they're going to say imo, right? So the tumtum's mother. The tumtum allows the tumtum's, their mother, to eat truma. How does this work? So first of all, they say, right, how does this work? We know how this works. As long as, okay, the woman is a Bat Yisrael, she's married to a Kohen, she eats truma. The Kohen dies, she only gets to continue eating truma if she has children. Doesn't matter, male or female. So that's what we mean. The tumtum allows their mother to eat. Why does it allow their mother to eat, or its mother to eat? Because the tumtum is a child of the mother. So to which the Gemara says, you don't need to tell me that. Obviously, since it could be male, it could be female, any child she has, it wouldn't matter whether the child's a tumtum or a male or a female. It doesn't make a difference. So imo pshita. They say, well, ma'u detema molid ma'achil she'ein molid eno ma'achil kamashmalan. You might have thought in order for your child to basically be considered a child that will allow you, again, what's the whole idea? It connects you to the family of the Kohanim to allow you to eat truma. That might only work if the child itself is capable of giving birth. And this tumtum is not capable of giving birth. So therefore, now why would you have thought that? Where would that come up? Because remember what it says, Yilid Beito, and we darshaned it at some point also, leholid, right? Not only can they, but that they also can give birth. So you might have thought that only a child who can give birth to another will keep you connected to the family. This comes to teach you, no, even a tumtum. Now they're going to go in to this last line of the Gemara. Okay, what we're going to do at this point is we have two explanations. Let's just review. How does a tumtum allow nashav, his women, its women to eat truma? One, either it was clear that there's male organs under there. Number two, it's not its wife, it's its mother. Okay, and that we saw in terms of the children allow the mother. So now we're going to bring our source that we were looking at, and we're going to talk about that weird line at the end that all of a sudden it talked about a tumtum at the bottom at the end again about the kachim issue. And we're now going to try to figure out if that can raise an issue against one of the opinions we just saw of Rava and Abaye. Tashma. So let's learn from the source we brought. So the first line was about a tumtum, doesn't need truma. Then we said a tumtum doesn't need truma or kachim. Abaye makes sense because the Breisha was talking about an arel vada. The Reisha was talking about one that's clear that it has male organs, and therefore, the Beitzavni karami b'chutz. Therefore, he can't eat truma, but he could eat kachim because he's a male kohen. The Ketane Seifa, when the Seifa said a tumtum can't eat truma or kachim, that was talking about a tumtum that we have no idea if they're male or female. Ein Beitzavni karim. So, according to Abaye, we can make this distinction here between the two mentions in the Bright. But tumtum de seifa lamali. According to Rava, why do you need a tumtum in the beginning and at the end if there's only one kind of tumtum? So my tumtum arel. When the last line of the Mishnah, it was really talking about an arel, an uncircumcised person. So the Gemara says that really makes no sense to say the word tumtum means arel there because, first of all, why wouldn't it say arel? And second of all, what are we saying here? And here there's a bigger question. Hashja safek arel lo achil. We don't know if the tumtum is uncircumcised or not because we don't know if the tumtum has male organs there or not. So what are we going to say? Since a safek arel, the first line is a tumtum who's safek arel, only in doubt. And we say that person can't eat truma. Vadai arel achil. Why would you even think that a definite arel? You wouldn't need to say at the end of that braita, a definite uncircumcised person can't eat truma. That would be obvious. So, matam kama. What they're trying to say is the way Rava will read this braita is the end is coming to explain the beginning. Matam tumtum eno ochel b'truma mipnei shesafek arel hu v'arel eno ochel lo b'truma v'lo b'kodshim. The last line is really when it says tumtum doesn't eat truma or kodshim. What it's really saying is an arel doesn't eat truma and kodshim. Why is it mentioning it? Because they want you to know the reason why a tumtum isn't is because a tumtum is possibly an uncircumcised person. Now, so that was all, again, what did we do structure-wise? We started with Rav Huna, who said that a mashuch, the foreskin is stretched over, can't eat truma on a rabbinic level. We brought two questions against him. One trying to say, storaita, we resolved that. The second one was saying it's actually permitted, and then we didn't resolve that at all. We left that as a question. And in that one, we got into this tumtum. So we tried to explain this whole situation of the tumtum, how they ended up with a wife. Could it possibly be or not? Okay. Lema kitanai. Now we want to suggest that what Rav Huna says is actually a machloket tannaim. That whether, and then that would resolve that braita that went against him, which is, one source, one Tana's opinion is it can eat, the mashuch can eat truma, and the other one says it can't. Mashuch v'gershin, so they bring a source that would show the opposite, that would show the machloket. Mashuch v'gershin itgayer kashumahu v'katan shavar zmano ushar kol animolim. Let's go through the cases. A mashuch, that's our case. A ger that converted and was already circumcised before they were Jewish. A katan, meaning way before, not like we did it as part of the conversion process, but they were already circumcised. Katan shavar zmano. You have a minor who, let's say a 9-day-old baby. They didn't do the Brit Milah on day number 8. They're already past its time. And you haven't yet done it. Oh, ushar kol animolim. So, or other kind of situations like this. What would that be? Well, for example, someone has 2 foreskins. What exactly that is a question among the commentaries. I'm not going to get into it. Not so important for our purposes, but some other weird kind of situation. Even though these are kind of a little out of the box, They still have to do it during the day. Where do they get this thing of during the day? Because it says, Ubayom Hashmini, and on the 8th day, you do it. They take day literally, okay? And even if the point here is, even if it's not on the 8th day, because a convert, right, is usually older than 8 days, and a mashuch, right? We're assuming we're talking about someone older. They're not on day number 8. The person who missed their day, right? They're past 8 days. They're not. So they still need to do it during the day. Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon Omer, Bizmano eini molim ela bayom, shelo bizmano nimolim bayom ubalayla. He says no, only the 8th day bris is on the day, during the day. Anyone else could do it at night as well. So my la baka miflage. Here's our attempt to show this is a machloket tannaim. Whether a mashuch can do a brit milah during the day only or also at night. Demar savar mashuch deoraita. The first opinion says mashuch is by Torah law. Umar savar mashuch de Rabbanan. And Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, who allows it at night, just says it's rabbinic and therefore you can do it at night. What's the big issue about this? Well, you want to say then basically everything they're discussing is rabbinic. And right, is a machloket. Is it rabbinic? Is it by Torah law? As soon as you get it out of Torah law, you no longer have to do it during the day. But what's the problem? We have a case of katan shavar zmano. If you didn't give a brit milah to your son at age 8 days and you do it at 9 days, what? Or you haven't yet done it, it becomes rabbinic, your obligation, and that's why you could do it at night according to Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon? Absolutely not. Nobody thinks it's rabbinic once it's past the 8th day. Of course, you're obligated by Torah law to do a brit milah. So, katan shavar zmano mi'ika lamanda amar de Rabbanan. Does anyone say it's Rabbanan? No. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, who permits a bris that's not on the proper day, even at night, is not because it's rabbinic, and therefore you can't say the same thing about the mashuch. You can't say it's because it's rabbinic, and the machloket is it rabbinic or is it by Torah law? So, in the end, they say, Ela de kule ama mashuch de Rabbanan, v'katan shavar zmano de oraita. Everyone agrees that mashuch is rabbinic, and katan shavar zmano is de oraita. In other words, we're now going to say we wanted to show that it's a debate whether it's forbidden by rabbinic law or by Torah law. Actually, this still wouldn't, I made a mistake before. This still wouldn't resolve the contradictory source. It actually says that a mashuch is allowed to eat truma, okay? This would only resolve, this would say somebody thinks it's forbidden by Torah law and somebody thinks it's rabbinic, okay? But now we say nobody thinks it's by Torah law, everybody thinks it's rabbinic, and what's the root of the machloket? It's about how we darshan the psukim. Mar savar darshinan u b'yom. The Tanakama says we darshan ubayom, and on the 8th day. On the 8th day comes to teach you, right? If it had just said on the 8th day, you would think it only has to be during the day when it's on the 8th day. And on the 8th day comes to include additional cases like the ones we just discussed. Umar savar lo darshinan ubayom. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon says we don't darshan that. No, we don't darshan ubayom. So now they're going to say, and we see this following issue in the following situation. We're going to have an interesting story about Rabbi Yochanan, an interesting reaction of his to what goes on. He was sitting and learning about notar. It's another case where it talks about end the day. Okay, it says ubayom. It says v'hayom. So there he says, now what's notar? You left over the meat beyond the designated time. You have to burn it. Each sacrifice, right? There's different options as to how much time you have to eat it. If it goes beyond that, you have to burn it. When do you burn it? Well, it says, right? It says v'hayom. So they say, from there you learn, it has to be during the day. So notar bizmano, if you do it on the right day, meaning the day it already expired, eno nisraf ela bayom. But shelo bizmano, Rabbi Yochanan says, when it's not its appropriate time, nisraf ben bayom ben balayla. If you pushed it off another day, you could do it even at night. Ve'etive Rabbi Elazar, the Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Elazar comes over to Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Elazar comes over to Rabbi Yochanan and he says, what are you talking about? Ainli Ella, I'm going to give you the exact same comparison by Brit Milah, and you'll see it's not true. Ainli Ella nimo l'shmini, right? The simple reading is, Bayom hashmini means you do it during the day on the 8th day. But, ainli, right, ainli mol Ella bayom. But minayin l'rabot l'tishal asara l'chadasar l'shneim asar. How do you know if you do a Brit Milah on day 9, 10, 11, 12, and etc., that you have to do it during the day? Talmud lomar uvayom. Comes and darshans Rabbi Elazar. Here you have it, ubayom. Now, afilu l'manda amar delo darish vav, and even if you say, remember we had that a few days ago, not everybody darshans vavs, like every vav you're going to darshan, no. But vav hey darish. Okay, so vav hey yediyah is like the word the, right? So now, v'hayom, which appears by notar, has the hey. Uvayom doesn't have a hey, but in grammar, uvayom, it translates as and on the 8th day. Okay, the bet bayom is also on and the. Okay, on the day. It includes it. It's just the hey drops because you can't say uvehayom. It would be too hard to say. So it is a vav and a hey. You would darsh. Okay, what's Rabbi Yochanan's reaction? Ishtik. He was silent. He didn't know what to say. Right? He was wowed by what Rabbi Elazar said. Remember, there are Moraim. Okay, just to remember. Second generation of Moraim in Eretz Yisrael. Rabbi Yochanan, one of the biggest, greatest Talmidei Chachamim, right? Here's this drush of Rabbi Elazar. He says, wow. Okay, so wow that B'tar Nafit, after Rabbi Elazar left the Beit Midrash, I guess he was embarrassed to say this while he was there. Amalei Rabbi Yochanan l'Rish Lakish, Ra'iti leben pidachi yoshev v'doresh k'moshe mi'piag v'ucha. I just saw the most amazing thing. I just saw Rabbi Elazar come up with this drasha as if he was Moshe getting Torah from God. Okay, an amazing, amazing thing. Well, Rish Lakish is going to totally deflate him. Amar le Rish Lakish, didehi, you think he came up with that on his own? He didn't come up with that on his own. He's not this great Talmid Chacham that you're making him to be. Okay, but matnitehi. Okay, this is the real blow to Rabbi Yochanan. It's a braita. Okay, what he's saying is found in a braita. What, you didn't know? Okay, and Rabbi Yochanan is sitting there, right? He was floored hearing Rabbi Elazar. Now he's floored thinking, how did I not know this was a braita? So, where is this found? But Torat Kohanim, it's in Torat Kohanim, which is a Midrash Halacha for Vayikra. Okay, that's where it is. So what was Rabbi Yochanan's reaction to this story, right? You could imagine him crawling into bed, right? Humiliated about what just happened. But instead, he springs into action. Nothing Tanya B'tzlati Yomi. He learns he learns it a few times over the course of 3 days. He goes through the entire thing, right? You think Daf Yomi is a crazy pace, right? Imagine going through all of Torah Kohanim in 3 days. And Savra B'tzlati Yarchin. And then he delved into it in depth 3 months until he really understood it properly. Okay, that was his reaction in order to say, oh, I can't believe I didn't know this braita existed, right? It's a good reason to do Daf Yomi, right? There's so many things that we see. Really? That exists? I didn't know that, right? Halavai, we had 3 months to delve into each stuff. Okay, Amar Rabbi Elazar. New topic. Okay, so that was all about, this was all an attempt to try to say that what Rav Huna said about the mashuch, is it d'oraita or d'Rabbanan? He said it was d'Rabbanan, can't eat truma. Is that really d'Rabbanan? Is it d'oraita? Can we say it's a machloket tannaim in the end? And we brought this machloket about, can it be done even at night, and thinking that would show it's rabbinic, and the one who says during the day would show it's Torah. And then we said, no, it all has to do with how you darshan those psukim. It has nothing to do with d'oraita or d'Rabbanan, because look what's in there, brit milah that's not in its proper time, that's already, right, that's d'oraita. So you can't say that. Right, and yet we say it could be done during the day, according, even at night, according to one opinion. So that shows it's not a d'oraita d'Rabbanan machlok. Amar Rabbi Elazar. Now we have one last topic to deal with today. Rabbi Elazar says, Arel shehiza, we're now getting back to the Arel, an uncircumcised person, shehiza, that sprinkled the para aduma waters. We're now talking about another topic. Truma, right? We've seen before that there's levels of tum and tara, and para aduma is very up there in terms of how seriously we take the tum and tara issue. So if an Arel can't eat truma, maybe an Arel can't sprinkle the para aduma waters. Comes Rabbi Elazar and says, no. Ariel shehizaza tok shera. He actually says it in a b'diavad language, like if he did it already, it works. Okay, which we're talking about the sprinkling of the para aduma waters. Okay, so now most of the commentaries say even lechatchila it's okay. Okay, and Ariel is allowed to get involved in this process. How do we know this? We're going to learn it from a tful yom. What's a tful yom? Someone who goes to the mikveh in the morning but has to wait till the nighttime to eat truma. Remember, that's the first mishnah. When do we say Kriyat Shema? From the time, right, the first Mishnah Brachot, the time the Kohanim were allowed to eat truma, meaning once the sun sets entirely. So now we're going to say, just like a tful yom. Now, you already went to the mikvah, so you're in this in-between stage. You can't eat truma, but it's a very famous halacha. We've talked about this before, that a tful yom can deal with the para aduma waters. Okay, they can sprinkle, they can mix it, they can do anything. And that's a big machloket. Why do we talk about Prushim Stukim? Remember that Stukim said no. And the Prushim insisted that every time they do the paraduma, they make sure someone is a tful yom. They even throw a sheretz on him to make him a tful yom, make him go to the mikvah to prove that they're right. Okay, so this is a big halacha by paraduma. So, Hafapisha Asur b'truma, a tful yom, even though he can't eat truma, he's kasher b'para. He can do the paraduma. So likewise, you would say an Arel can't eat truma, but can do paraduma. So they say, no, that's not a good proof. Mala tful yom shekei mutar b'maaser, but a tful yom can eat maaser, and an RL can't. So you see, there's certain things a tful yom can do that an RL can't. So they say, wait, you can't disprove us from maaser because atu ana la'achila kamrina, maaser is eating, and paraduma is dealing, right, touching. So Ana achila kamrina, we weren't talking about eating. Ana l'negia kamrina, we're talking about touching. And matful yom shasur b'negia de truma, a tful yom can't touch truma because he'll make it impure because he's still not fully pure. And yet mutar b'para, but can touch the paraduma waters and doesn't cause it to be impure. So arel shemutar b'negia, here the arel is even better than its tful yom. In arel that's permitted to touch truma, doesn't make it tameh if he touches truma. Wouldn't we then say for sure he can do the para? And that's where he gets it from. Tanya Namihachi, bright to proof. Arel shiza zatok shera umaaseh hayav yichshiru chachamim azato. It was a case that happened and they permitted it. Okay, where he had done the haza'ah, the sprinkling, and they said no problem, it's fine. Today. Now we're going to bring a contradiction. We're back to tumtum. Tumtum shekidesh. Now here, kidesh is not kiddushin like we saw before. It's very confusing. Kidesh means he mixed the waters. To mix the paraduma waters with the ash, like paraduma ashes with the water, is called kidesh. So a tumtum shekidesh kiddusho pasul mipnei shehu safek arel. What do you see here? A tumtum can't. It doesn't work because he's a safek arel. That means an arel can't do it, right? And that goes against what we just said. The arel pasul kadesh, and here it says it explicitly. An arel can't. But an androgynous can, okay, because we're going to see that a woman can. An androgynous, remember, isn't an arel. An androgynous is just safek zachar, safek nekeva, right, male, female. So since a woman can do it, therefore an androgynous can as well. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, af androgynous shekidesh kiddusha psulim mipnei shesafek isha v'isha psula lekadesh. He disagrees and thinks a woman can't do it. Okay, we're going to see soon where they get this from. Anyway. Back to our point, katani miat arel usafek arel pasum l'kadesh, and that goes against. So Rav Yosef says, don't worry about this brayta. Rav Yosef, hi Tana de Rabbi Akiva. This is Rabbi Akiva's opinion. Mirabe le arel ketame. Rabbi Akiva holds arel is like a tameh, and therefore can't do the paraduma waters, right? A tameh, really, not a tful yom who went to the mikvah already. So, Tanya, how do we know this? From yesterday and the day before, we already saw this. Rabbi Akiva Omer, ish l'rabota arel. Where did they get the arel from? The candy truma from the pasuk about the tameh. So basically, he holds arel is like tameh for all intents and purposes. So Rava doesn't like this answer that just associate that brayta with Rabbi Akiva because Rabbi Akiva holds arel is ketameh for all intents and purposes. If that's the case, he says, okay. So starting with Rava Hava Yatrina Kamed Rav Yosef. One day I was with Rav Yosef at Kashili and I raised a question against him. I said to him, Lo l'shtamei tana v'litnei arel v'atameh. If really Rabbi Akiva said arel is ketameh, there should have been a Mishnah that included the two arel and tameh together as if they're equal. And then we should have said that brayta or Mishnah is Rabbi Akiva, and we don't see anything like that. To which they say, yes, we do. When it comes to going to the temple for the holidays, arel and tameh are ptulim. There you see them together, and that must be Rabbi Akiva. To which the Gemara rejects that. No, it's not. Because hata mishum demais. Okay, that's because they both have something about them that's despicable that doesn't allow them to go to the temple. It would be like a slap in the face of God. One, if he's uncircumcised, and two, if he's impure, right? Because you can't go impure at the temple. Those are both saying, right, desecrating the temple almost. So therefore, the two are together not because arel is like tameh for all intents and purposes. So basically, Rava's question against Rav Yosef stands. Now we're going to say azdu l'tamayu. We're going back to this machloket about the androgynous and the tumtum and the woman and who can and who can't do the paraduma waters. And now we're going to see where they get it from and how they're consistent with their opinions elsewhere. Azdu l'tamayu d'tanya. Hakol ksherim l'kadesh chutz mecheresh shotev katan. According to Tanakama, only a minor and a cheresh and a shoteh, right, who don't have da'at, they can't do the paraduma waters. Everyone else can, meaning a woman, a tumtum, and a androgynous, they're all fine. Rabbi Yehuda machshir b'katan u'posel b'isha b'androgynous. So here's the brayta that shows exactly in line with their opinions by us. Okay, and he actually says the opposite about a katan. And we're going to see where they get it from. A katan is allowed to, according to Rabbi Yehuda, but the woman and the androgynous can't. My time at the Rabbanan. So where did they get it from? Dichtiv, by the paraduma, it says, it's a bit of a strange pasuk. It says, V'lakhu tameh me'afar srifat para. You take. Now this is what the Gemara is going to call asefa, collecting. and it's in plural. V'lakchu, they took, right, or they take from the sreifat para, from the ashes, v'natan alav, and then they put, this is in singular form, the mayim chayim al keli, they put fresh water. So now they say, okay, what do we do with this? Hanach, because it says v'lakchu v'natan, hanach de pasle ba'asefa, pasle b'kiddush. Hanach de ksherim ba'asefa, ksherim l'kiddush. Whoever can collect is allowed to mix the waters. Whoever can't collect can't mix the waters. And was known to them that the woman is allowed to collect, and therefore Tanakama says the woman can therefore mix the waters. And a child, a minor, is not allowed to collect, so the minor is not allowed to mix. That's Tanakama. For Rabbi Yehuda says, Amar l'chaim kenem akrav l'kach. Why does it say it in plural then? The lakhu is to say, even those who can't do asefa are allowed to do the nitina. It's coming to like include something extra. But you might have someone who couldn't do that, but can actually do the mixing. And what's that? A katan. Okay, so now they say, well then, ihachi, if you're going to include more people, so why won't you include the isha who can collect the waters? Isha nami. It says, v'natan v'lo nitana. It says, in masculine form, vinatan. That means only men and not women. Now the problem was back to the rabbis. Why is there plural and then singular? And that what that will finish. Rabbanan ikti v'lakach vinatan hava amina. And as if it said singular form, right again. It's plural, then singular. If it had said singular, when I have thought shakal chaviyavchad, it has to be the same person who does both. Therefore, to teach you, two people could take it, right? Or it doesn't have to be the same person who does the taking and like the collecting and the mixing. So why wouldn't it just do everything plural? Well, then you might have thought, it has to be collected by two people and it has to be mixed by two people. Therefore, the reason why it changes is not like Rabbi Yehuda said to include a katan who couldn't do the other, but it's to say, even if two people could collect it and one person, a third person could mix it, doesn't have to be the same people and it doesn't matter how many people. So that's how each one darshans the psukim and gets to their difference of opinion about what we saw. That was all kind of an aside to explain this machloket that we mentioned, what it was all to try to figure out, Arel Shizaza Tokshera, right? That was Rabbi Elazar's opinion. Okay, we'll stop here and we'll continue with this topic in tomorrow's shiur. Have a great day.